So we're here tonight to, first of all, my name is Paul Toll. You may have seen me in my previous role. I recently retired in April as President and CEO of the Heuristic Partnership. And it's basically a privately funded organization that has an economic development mission in Heuristic County to try to grow the economy, grow our workforce, and everything in between. So retired and already back into a few things. I guess you can't stay retired too long. But anyway, I wanted to thank you for listening tonight to our esteemed panel here as we hit on a couple of very important issues, I call them pocketbook issues, because one of them impacts everybody in the state of Maine, both directly and indirectly. The other really has a very tough impact on our seniors. So thanks for taking the time to hear our panel. We have the hall till 7:30, so in the interest of time, let's hold all the questions until the end. We will have a Q&A period where you can ask the panelists questions about anything you've heard or anything you may have on those two topics. And as I introduce, I'll introduce the panelists as we move through it, and as we talk about the two different things. So we'll start first with the energy piece, the electric bill piece, and I think by now you've opened your July bill. Has anyone not seen their most recent bill and seen the little surprise in there? And it's either under what they call stranded costs or a new charge that they've just come up with on my bill, which is the first time I've ever seen it in July, public service charge, or public policy charge, sorry, which is more appropriately named than the catch-all bucket for everything from decommissioning Maine Yankee and all that, all fell under stranded costs, and that went up and down, and you never really knew what was in that catch-all bucket, but it ended up as a charge to ratepayers. And more recently, that was actually negative because they actually collected too much from us under stranded costs until this wonderful program called net energy billing through the solar program came along. So that's what we're seeing now. Now they've aptly named it public policy charge. You've got a sheet at your tables that pretty much lays out how we get into this with the solar program that originated back in 2019. And more importantly, if you look to the right-hand side, who voted for it? I can tell you nobody at this table or predecessors in their party voted for that thing. It was a terrible bill. Everybody knew it at the time, but there was a lot of pressure to accelerate the solar program in the state of Maine and incentivize developers to come here. Well, the incentive is quite steep, as you'll hear as we go on this evening. So, and by the way, in 2021, the Republicans tried twice, started at that point, tried twice to repeal this and sort of ran into some headwinds from the majority party. So that being said, I would like to introduce our first panelist. He doesn't need any introduction, I'm pretty sure, in this region, Representative Roger Albert, and basically just ask him, why is solar so expensive in the state of Maine?
It's on.
It's on.
It's on. Don't touch
It's
it.
on. Why is solar so expensive? Good God. We are way up north. I'm going to ask all of you to contemplate something here. Do you see any solar panels program in Canada?
No.
I haven't. A lot of windmills, but certainly no solar. Here we need to understand, someone needs to understand that our sunlight here does come in, but hot dog, the days are short. And come in winter time, they're even shorter. I think most of you might remember when Houston, Texas, I don't know, maybe back in 3-4 years ago, had snow showers. Cover their solar panels, and we're out of electricity power from those panels for 2 weeks. So just the statistics of where we're at, to me, doesn't make sense. There are other ways, I would imagine, that we can produce electricity. And again, I won't get into the specifics, but let your imagination go wild. Who's taken a ride down south recently? See a lot of agricultural land being taken up by solar panels. I don't know. We're just not the state to profit from solar panels. Again, this is my opinion. But then you vote me to give you my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I'll move on now to the Honorable Sue Bernard. She served in the 130th legislature as a representative out of Caribou, and more recently she is running for Senate District 1. Just recently, most people weren't even aware of what storage really was, or the costs associated with it, or its connection to solar. I mean, can you talk about what's happening with this storage thing we hear about?
Sure. You know, we really didn't talk much about storage back in the day when we were first talking about let's get some solar panels up and all of that. We really didn't mention it because the money that we were going to need to put into that program to begin with was so astronomical to get incentives for people and for businesses to set up solar farms. It was going to be very, very expensive to begin with, and since it was going to be the state to pay individuals or businesses to set up a solar farm, that when we say the state pays, what does that really mean?
We're paying.
It means
right.
we're paying, of course. And so that was step one. Step two is that we've got to now, we've got to be able to construct storage facilities to store the energy that's produced. So just the other day, last week I believe it was in the paper that the federal government gave Maine, awarded Maine $147 million to set up a storage facility in Lincoln, Maine. That's where it's going to, that's where it will be. Now, when you hear, oh great, we got a federal grant. Well, I just want to thank personally the DOE, Department of Energy, for giving us this $147 million federal grant, which, you know, when you hear federal grant, that ought to ring some bells in your head. And what it ought to ring is that any grant that comes from the state or from the feds, they don't manufacture money. Where does the money come from? Thank you, our taxes, exactly. So whenever you hear it, okay, we got a $147 million facility that's going to be built, that means we're all building it. That's okay. You build it, I build it, we're all going to build it. And that's to have a storage facility. Now that was not brought into the equation in the beginning. So that's kind of like a plus $147 million to figure out how much does all this cost? How much does it cost to have solar power? Well, solar power, now we're finding out more about what it's going to cost. When you think about what it costs to generate power through solar, it's going to be the cost of the incentives that are given to people or industries that are building these solar plants and fields. That's number one. Number two, we're going to have storage facilities, which now, I mean, the first one is $147 million. That's just the first one. We're going to be needing more of those. And we're going to need to maintain all of them. So we are way into it, just so you know. And so we, Maine chose this solar solution for our power production. Perhaps the, if not the, most expensive way of producing power there is. You might ask, why? Well, we're not the first state that has done that, but in the scheme of things, when you look at how big Maine is, how many people are in it, we're spending more for it than anyone else. Now, California is also doing it. Not sure why we would want to be running after California to try to be like them, but that's another story for another day. I want you to know that before the money came down from the federal government and we knew about how much the storage was going to cost, Maine's own public advocate, the public advocate, by the way, that is put into place by the governor and the governor's party, the public advocate told everyone that the ratepayers are going to be into this solar generation to the tune of, gotta get it right, want to make sure to look, because it floors me every time, $220 million per year over 20 years. And let me just do the math for you. What that means as a total is $4 billion, that's with a B, $4 billion over a 20-year period. That's a lot of money. And that's what we're stuck with right now.
Thank you, Sue. Some pretty staggering numbers there. And on the theme of storage, I want to just put this in a little bit better perspective for you so you can get your arms around this, or at least try. We've got about 45 megawatts of solar. I'm talking just about Aroostook County on the what they call the Maine Public District, or Maine Public Grid up here that Versant operates. About 45 megawatts already operating. There's about 45 more that's already been granted an interconnection agreement and approved by the PUC to be built. So that'll get us up to the 90 to 100 basically. There's still another 50 to 60 megawatts that hasn't been approved for their interconnection agreement yet, but they're still going for these same incentives and subsidies that we're talking about. The total load in all of northern Maine is not even 100 megawatts. So that tells you, what are we going to do with the extra 30, 40, 50, 60 megawatts of power when the sun's shining on a July afternoon or several months of the year? The answer is it has to go to storage. These facilities are very expensive. The people that designed this bill, that crafted this bill in 2019, knew this, but they didn't share it with the constituents because they knew it would scare them out of the vote. They'd say, why would you ever vote for something like this? So that was the dirty little secret that nobody bothered to tell you until you saw the article about Lincoln getting $147 million from in grants. So Representative Mark Babin was going to join us this evening. He had a family medical situation, or emergency situation he had to take care of. We hope everything's well with him and his family. But I do want to talk, I was going to ask him a question because he sits on the most important committee in Augusta, the Energy, Utilities, and Technologies Committee. It's called EUT. He sits on that committee, or he sat on it. Hopefully he still will. And that's where all the bills come and either pass or get voted down before it reaches the floor for the floor vote. So that's the busiest committee in all of Augusta, and they're in way over their heads. I got to tell you, Mark's a great guy. He's a pastor down in Fort Fairfield. He's not an electrical engineer. He's asked to vote on bills like this, and he's probably one of the smartest people in that committee. They're not qualified to pass legislation like this, yet they vote these. They get these incredibly complicated bills. 20, 25 pages, engineering, grid engineering, electrical engineering, all this stuff through there, and they they end up falling in line with the party line. So that's what happens. I told you earlier that the Republicans tried to stop this a couple different times. LD 1347 was down there about a year and a half ago. The Public Advocate tried to get, Bill Harwood was on the Republican side to try to get this to pass, because he warned everybody it's going to cost $220 million a year for 20 years. We have to do something about this. This is a Democrat appointed public advocate. He did everything he could and got a bipartisan bill out of committee onto the floor for votes, and then they can all tell you how chaotic it gets down there when these things get on the floor. That's when the caucuses get together and say, you got to vote this way. They haven't heard anything that happened in the committee, but they all vote as a caucus. And the Democrats, hats off to them, they reversed the Democrats that had voted for this in the EUT committee, and several other people that were hearing from their constituents that didn't like this, that wanted something to be done about it. They went against the will of their constituents, and the bill never passed. So I give the Republicans a tip of the hat for trying to do something about this, but as the minority party, it's very difficult to do anything down there. I think the solar lobby played a critical role in this. So anyway, I want to move on now. Also joining us, Dr. Lucian Daigle from Fort Kent. He's running for District 1 House, which was vacated by Austin Terry, as you know, who's running for Congress. So, Lucian, you certainly see a lot of patients coming in out of your office. What are their top concerns or concerns?
Well, after 45 years working in people's mouths, and sometimes I let them talk, not always, but the most common thing I've been hearing lately, since I went back to work part-time after retiring, is the cost of living issue. Everybody says it's costing me too much for this, too much for that. So the most common thing they mention is food. It's something we all do. The cost of groceries has increased tremendously. And if you look at we're talking about electricity rates, if we look at the impact electricity has on a grocery store, it's just unbelievable. Every time you go into a store, you get all these open coolers. You get freezers that we open the doors and close them, I don't know how many times a day. Every time you do that, cold air comes out, you got to recool it, and it takes a lot of electricity. Their electric rates are going to go up maybe 4 to 5 times. So if you got a store that spends 20 grand on electricity as a rule, and now it's going to cost them 80 or more thousand, you and I are going to have to pay that difference in the cost. The store cannot absorb that type of cost. So it's passed on to the consumers, which is us. You know, you got the electricity used for the coolers, you get the lights. It results in us paying more for the groceries we have to buy. Now, if we're going to look at a bigger picture, think of the farmer who grows the crop. His electric rates are going up. So what? It costs more for that food from him. How about the packaging company? Whoever packages this has a higher electric rate. So that increases the cost of food. We've already talked about the grocery store. The shipper that brought it to that store has an increased cost. Then when you get that stuff home, you got to put it in your fridge or your freezer. And guess what? It's going to cost you more to keep it in your house. So when we look at cost of food and the impact it has on our whole economy, it's huge. And, you know, our rates are going up. Why? We talked about this whole solar and wind power and all these things that are impacting our rates. In 2018, I was approached by a company who wanted to rent some of my land on the farm to put a solar array. Seemed like a great deal at the time. We signed a contract. Have no idea what was coming on. In hindsight, you look at this, it wasn't a good deal for Maine. But the reason it's not a good deal for Maine is all because of The legislation. If we had a level playing field for all the sources of electric power that we have, it wouldn't be costing us so much for solar, because it would be equal to what we pay for hydro or other sources. The problem is not solar or wind, it's our legislation that has caused this issue. Now you pay for it and so do I. And we need to do something. You know, we have to make ends meet, right? It's really difficult to do that when somebody keeps moving the ends. And you know, these policies that we put into play in our state legislature have moved the ends really far apart. And there's almost no way for a lot of the elderly to make these payments. It's really wrong. So we've got an increased cost, and I talked to a lot of elderly people who are on a fixed income, and they're wondering, how am I going to make this work? Question is, I don't know. We need to do something. And then we have taxes. And I will stop there because somebody else will tackle that.
Thank you, Lucian.
There was an issue that wasn't brought up, and it was when it came to energy, it was economic. If Maine's energy policy creates energy that is so expensive to not just run a home, but to run a business, we're actually driving business expansion out of the state. We're not being attractive to businesses that would come here to provide good anchor jobs to communities. And anyone interested in any type of economic development, aside from maybe building a solar field, would essentially go elsewhere. And we're getting beat on the national scale by other states that are providing much more attractive energy environments and economic environments for businesses to come to. And so I think, you know, when it comes to Maine's energy policy, this is a foundational issue. And if we don't fix it very, very soon, it may, I mean, we're going to be last in line. This is, I don't want us to sound like we're just complaining about a problem. We, in the 131st legislature, we put solutions forward that were rejected by Democrats. One of which was to end net energy billing. Another one was to reduce the cap on, the 100 megawatt cap on hydropower, which would allow Maine to buy hydropower from Hydro-Quebec and Hydro-New Brunswick. It's renewable, it's clean, it runs day or night, whether the sun is shining or not. We have no reason or need to build or buy storage facilities. It's good, solid technology, and the reason hydropower is legislatively suppressed is because it's such a better product than solar. There is no way solar can compete against it for steady, reliable delivery or cost. And that's what we're looking at. You know, just sort of to close, elections have consequences. And between Maine's tax policy and Maine's energy policy, these are the consequences that we're facing come November. So, thank you.
And by cost competitive, I'll give you the numbers. It's about 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour for hydro. Guess what our solar developers, of which 90% are out-of-state developers, by the way. And how much they're getting paid? About 24 cents a kilowatt hour for those wonderful farms we're seeing, so solar farms.
And I forgot one thing, of course I'm not going to let you go. I forgot one thing that is really, really important. You know, we talked about hydro, and the state actually has a cap on how much hydropower we can generate. That was, and that was determined a number of years ago, around the year 2010, and they put a cap on it. And the reason that they said they put a cap on hydropower, think about this now, was because it's not renewable. Of course it's renewable, but they said it wasn't renewable, and that was the reason that they put a cap on hydropower.
It's as though when the water flows over the dam, it's gone forever.
Yeah, right.
But I will mention one other point on energy, and I'm glad you brought it up, Donnie. Again, for 6 years, Roosting Partnership, it was all economic development. and it was about how do we convince people to invest in Maine, Aroostook County specifically. And always, the top three things they would say is, what's your workforce, what's your energy costs, and what's your taxes? Those are the things that all businesses that were looking to invest in Maine, all investors, developers, they would all address that. You can get into specifics, like what's your feedstock in the case of agriculture products, forest products and stuff, but those three were common to every business that looked to expand here. And unfortunately, we didn't have a real good answer for a couple of those. So, and we've held our position in the top 10 for energy costs in the country for as long as I can remember. And it makes no sense to me. It doesn't make any sense at all.
I want to say this, be careful in this room that we're not blaming too much on Versant. Versant is passing through the cost of this policy that the state has adopted. The state has adopted, we're going to do solar and here's how much it's going to cost, and Versant, you're going to have to pass through these costs to your customers, you. So the question will be, if we continue the way that we are,
Yes.
I would expect that you would have higher rates next summer.
The legislature determines the rates that you're paying. It's not Versant, CMP, or the PUC.
I wish.
So we need to change the legislation. And that can only happen, you guys vote for representatives or senators that will speak for you or not. Find somebody who will speak for you.